Welcome to FitBizU. I'm your host, Jill Coleman, certified personal trainer and nutrition coach turned business mentor for thousands of fitness professionals over the last decade. Here at FitBizU, I'll be sharing tactical, actionable strategies for those who want to quit the time for money grind and make a bigger impact and generate real money online. I'll be in the trenches with you as you create new coaching programs, launch new online products, and scale your business to multiple six figures and beyond. Here, you'll always get real, honest advice. No BS, zero smoke and mirrors, a touch of tough love, and plenty of action steps you can implement right away. Let's get into the show. What is up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of FitBizU. I'm your host, Jill Coleman, and today I'm just going to do a little intro because this is actually an interview, and this is an interview that I recorded a couple of months ago when I was in Australia with Kayla Lee. So Kayla Lee, it's _Kayla, Kaylee. And she is the host of a podcast called AWPT University. And she is someone who coaches women in health and fitness, but now she also does business coaching. And so she actually lives in Australia. I was there. She reached out to me and she was like, hey, I see that you're in the Gold Coast, which of course I was. And she's like, I'd love to pod while you're here. So it was really cool getting to meet an internet friend in real life. And this was actually an episode that we recorded for her podcast back in December. It actually aired in December, but I wanted you guys to get it here because she interviewed me on all sorts of really fun stuff, things that sometimes I don't talk about on this podcast, things like mindset and team building and some of the bigger challenges that we've had over the last couple of years. We talk a lot about the pandemic and the online space during that time, what I call the pandemic boomerang, and really sort of what it takes, because it's really cool because Kayla she's kind of on her own journey. She's definitely built a massive business when she was coaching, women in the gym, and now she has transitioned into business and she has been super successful in that sphere as well. So it's been really fun to have this conversation with her and to meet someone across the sea and be able to record with her. So I want to give you guys a little intro. This is an interview where Kayla is actually interviewing me, but we have a really awesome discussion. I think you guys will really like this one. And so give it a listen and I'll see you on the next episode.
Do you find that a lot of the people that come to you for business coaching now are coaches and personal trainers because of your background in business?
Totally.
Or has it
so it's mostly, health and fitness pros. I mean, every once in a while I'll get like a physio or, I don't know, massage therapist or, something like that. But everyone's under the umbrella of wellness.
Yeah.
Because I still have a meat-headed heart. Like I still love lifting, love training, so I show that side of things too. Yeah. And so Jill Fit grew to a six-figure online business before I even started doing business coaching. So I had to really learn business and I didn't know it, so I started like just eating up everything I possibly could, going to conferences, buying courses, like just consuming everything.
Well, I think you kind of have to be like, it's almost like you have to have those results before you go into the business space, because it's almost like, well, how do you trust someone if they don't have the results? And it's the same, I guess, for personal trainers and coaches. It's like, you have to have some embodiment of being into fitness, loving fitness. Your clients don't have to love fitness, but you being able to embody that and then show that energetically to them and have results.
Totally.
Before you go into it.
Yeah, because I've worked with like business coaches before where they're like, oh, just make like a PDF download of like how to get a six pack. And I'm like, you don't really understand our space. Like it's so much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
So you need to have a coach who can speak the language too,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think that's so important as well, because you're 100% right. Like I have definitely, I've had coaches and coaches that aren't necessarily like in the fitness space either. And it's like, it's different. Like the things that relate to one industry might not necessarily work for another industry, just like in person or like a brick and mortar business is going to be different to the online space as well.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah. So Jill Coleman.
Oh, are we live? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, we're live. I started like.
Okay, good. Love it.
Yeah. I thought it was a really great intro. So I have obviously a very special guest who's flown all the way from LA, as you can tell by the accent. Jill Coleman is a business coach, but she has had, like she said before, a very successful business in the fitness industry before that. So we're going to pick her brain. We're going to see how she has done this, who she's had to become to be this person who has had this very successful business and coming from a fitness space as well, and to get some gold nuggets into, you know, how you can as well build your own like multiple 6-figure, 7-figure business in the fitness industry as well. Because she's been doing this a long time. She's been doing this since 2012, so she's got a lot of experience under her belt. So Jill, I wanted to ask you, like, when you first started, where were you, like, who were you, you know, and I'd love to just speak about like your journey over the years into how you've come to where you are now.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm super excited to be here and tell the story. It's funny. I started my online business in 2010 as a blogger, and that was when like people were reading like a ton of blogs. And so I just blogged every day, but I was a full-time personal trainer from the time I was 18. So I was working in the gym, as a lot of coaches do, getting to the point where I was in complete scarcity, working a ton of time for money. At one point, I was working like 70 to 80 hours a week in the gym, teaching fitness classes, personal training, and I was working full-time at a university. And I was also doing figure competitions and doing fitness modeling at the time. Wow. And it was fine. Like I loved seeing my body transform, but what I realized quickly was if I wanted JillFit to work as a business, especially as an online business, I really couldn't afford to, number one, be in the gym 70 hours a week, but also spending as much time and energy as I was on my body. I was very body obsessed. I was very food obsessed. I was at the gym 2-3 times a day doing my own workouts on top of training clients. And what I realized quickly was if I wanted this online business to be successful, I had to figure out a way to automate that side of my life. And that was really hard. I did magazine shoots. I was on covers of magazines. And for me, it was a lot of ego pursuits. And I assumed that if I looked the part and had the six-pack and all that, that people would want to train with me. I didn't realize that I didn't know business. I thought if I was just a great personal trainer who had the top credential, that I would definitely be successful as a business owner. Totally different skill set. And so it was about 18 months into building JillFit that I realized I needed to figure out how to scale this thing. I just literally took what I was doing at the gym and then started doing it online. I would get home from the gym at 10 o'clock at night, start writing programs for people, writing blogs until 1 a.m. I knew I couldn't sustain that. I will say as a caveat, I think when you're first getting started, there's probably going to be a period of time where you are going to be doing the most. I don't think you kind of get away from that right away. You're successful. I've been at this a long time. I think people could look at you, you're traveling the world and things like that and be like, wow, it's like she has so much time freedom. I want that. Not realizing that you probably were doing like 2-3 jobs at one point to get to the point where you could leverage your time a little bit better. So I never want to skip over that part. The first 18 months of JillFit, I was doing full-time in the gym and full-time online. And when I finally quit my full-time job, I wasn't making dollar for dollar at JillFit what I was making in person. So I think there's this misconception that you have to wait until you're making dollar for dollar. It's like you might take a pay cut if you really want to make this online thing successful. And huge mindset shift in 2012. Instead of just being an in-person online trainer, I started like really leveraging different containers, group containers, DIY products. I created my first program that didn't require me to be like at the helm coaching someone in real time. And so that was the beginning of it. And at that point, people started asking me like, how are you doing what you're doing? And so I just started teaching the blogging model back in 2012. Of course, things have evolved so much since then, but it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things I was actually going to say is like, I think there actually has to be, and for most people, there is that period of like hustle. And that's probably the bit, and I hear it so much from my clients as well, that's probably the bit that actually creates that desire to create more time freedom. And going through that is, it's like, it's knowing what you don't want, but it's also like a part of the journey. Like it's also a part of like knowing what you do want and desiring and knowing what you do and building from there and building like a really solid foundation. Mm-hmm. And, as you said, like 2012, that's when you started the group containers, you started creating scalable offers. It is like, it pushes you to a point where it's like, how can this be done better? Like I'm doing so well, like I'm on, 70 hours on the gym floor, 70, 80 hours, but it's tiring and it's exhausting. And it's like, you do actually have to create that skill set to become like an expert in your field first. And you have to craft these skills. But we were saying just off air before we started was that it gets to a point where you can be the best coach and you can know what you're talking about and you can like have this amazing business and all these things. But then it gets to a point where it's like, if you want to create real impact and like we can talk about money, and like money is, you know, it can be related to impact, but impact's really what we want as personal trainers, because that's what we got in to this for, is like to help people. To create impact, you need to be seen, and you need to have more people seeing you, and you need to be able to have the confidence to market yourself and to really just like expand your network, and even like the network of the people in your containers and things like that. Totally. As well.
Yeah, and that's, I think, it can be really scary. So I work with a lot of beginners to business in their first like year or two. That's our we have an offer called Fitness Business Accelerator, and we have about 250 people go through that each year. And like, that's always some of the most surprising stuff to me, is their fear of being seen, and what are people going to think, and the, you know, the audacity of putting themselves out there. Because up until this point, you know, as a coach, I'm saying, okay, we got to be posting like every single day on social. And meanwhile, up until that point, they've been posting like once every couple months of their kids or something, you know? And so showing up in a complete and doing a 180, I feel like, and it's hard, I think, because younger people grew up so much more with the internet. I think it's like more easy, I want to say quote unquote easy relatively, to just be like, cool, this is what everyone does. So there's a culture around showcasing yourself. I work with a lot of like 40-year-old moms who like have a couple kids and this is their second career. And I love what you said about needing to get the reps somewhere first, because the people that I notice do the best, they come in with a level of mastery and a level of competency already. So they have a show of evidence in their life that they've done something well. And so when they come online, they go, oh, well, I've already done it over here. Why couldn't I do it over here too? And that sort of, that confidence sort of translates. I find the people who have the hardest time are the ones who maybe just got their certification like last month. And they didn't have any reps in the gym, and they have no confidence talking to people and showing up. Because even if you're just a personal trainer in person, you still have to have a level of competency about you and conviction and confidence, and show up in that way where you have authority. And if you can transfer that to the internet space, and if you can, it's going to be a little bit tougher.
Well, it's like that sense of entitlement, right? Like if you've just gotten your certificate and and it's like, oh, I need to be making like thousands of dollars online in my first year kind of thing. And it's like, well, actually, like, do you have evidence of results with clients? Like, that's first things first, is like, I think one thing that really stops coaches is like the confidence of actually having results and actually believing in your service. Like, that is how you're going to build a business. I mean, you can definitely build a business if you don't actually believe in your product and service. It's just not going to be very sustainable, is the thing. And, you know, what you were saying about people and the visibility, like, did you have that at the very start? Did you have that when you were blogging? Did you have that nervousness and that?
I didn't really, because I was a competitor for 6 years. And so, you know, there's something about getting up on stage. Now, I had like other sort of insecurities and I was very self-conscious about my body and needing to look a certain way. And I was definitely fell into the trap of like the whole highlight reel thing. I'm only going to show myself when I'm in show shape. And I sort of fell into that trap early on. And I think when you come online, you have this feeling of like everything I say has to be correct. You know, I remember when I started blogging the first 3 months, I would be like looking at biochemistry books, like, you know, and like making sure that all my science was correct. It was taking me hours, if not days, to write blogs. And it was about 3 months into blogging, and I blogged every single day. So it was a lot of like recipes, workouts, stuff like that. But it was about 3 months in, and I was just having a bad day. I was going through some stuff in my personal relationship, and I was just like, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to like show up and just talk about this struggle that I'm having and how I'm feeling. And that was the most well-received blog up until that point. And I was like, why the fuck have I been looking at all these biochemistry books all this time? Like, I can just show up as me. And I felt validated that people wanted to see like the quote unquote real me. We throw this word authenticity around quite a bit now, but back in this is early 2011, like no one was really talking about that. No one's really showing themselves. I remember the first time I shared myself drinking a glass of wine on the internet in 2012, and it was so vulnerable because I'm supposed to be this perfect fitness professional who does everything right, and it's almost and so I think we've come a long way obviously with that. So I never really had that, and then you just make these small, like that blog was, you have these small moments in your career where you pull back the curtain a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and you start to see that it's safe. to the point where you've come to find out that people are following you and your audience loves you because of those imperfections, and not because you're doing, I don't know about you, but like, I can't relate to someone who's like, here's all my perfect Tupperwares that I'm eating out of for like my entire, they show their fridge of like their meal prep, and it's like, I don't know, maybe you do that, but it's like 50 Tupperwares. And I'm like, I just couldn't. That's just not me anymore, So I wouldn't relate to that. I'd be like, that's great for you, but there's nothing relatable about that. And so I think we do have to walk this fine line between being open and being honest and being vulnerable to who we are as a person, while also having the authority to be someone who deserves to be listened to and to be hired.
I love that, like the human behind the business, because we do get stuck in looking at, oh, that person has the perfect life and like all the things are going right and everything's happening, and being vulnerable and showing that, no, like I'm a human and, I do these things. I think it helps people realize that they can do it too as well. Like if she can do that and she can do it this way and do it all that. Like I definitely used to be like, I guess, show myself as being, very hardworking, but I have days off, and like I like to show that now. Like I have a day off in the middle of the week where it's just like I'm a little bit more disconnected from social media, from like actually being in the business and working and things like that. And it's really important to take that time as well to reset, because it's only so sustainable to be able to, like, we were talking about hustle before, is like you get to a point where it's like breakout. And so I want to do this for a long, long time. So I want it to be sustainable for me, and I want my business to be sustainable for me and work with my lifestyle, right? Like I don't want to be, at the start we were saying you do have to work a little bit harder to get the momentum going. But then over time, it's like just trusting in yourself and knowing that you're in it for the long run. And I always relate these things because we work with a lot of fitness professionals. I like relating it to fitness. If you were to train 6-7 days a week and not have any recovery, you're not going to get further down the track. So sometimes you have to take a step back. And you were saying this before, in that transition to in-person online, there might be a point where you actually have to take a step back to take 2 steps forward.
Yeah, and I think and I'm sure you've had this experience where, especially if you come from the fitness industry, there's a lot of scarcity in the fitness industry where it's like, gym owners are worried that trainers are taking clients, and trainers are worried that clients are leaving all the time. And if you don't take this money from this client, another trainer is going to take them. And so I remember I was just chasing money for such a long time. And I had this moment when I was driving. It was like Friday night at 8:00 at night. And I was driving across town like 20 minutes to train one client for $15. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing right now? Like, literally, I was like, how did I get here? Like, how is this my life? And I still was broke, by the way, obviously. But it was like, I remember being like, how did I get to a point where I said this was okay? I was working weekends. I was working Friday night. My friends and family are out doing dinner, having like the weekend. And it was that moment that I vowed to start doing things differently. And yes, I think it looks like a step back, but really it's 2 steps forward. And I started making decisions based on time and not money. And when I started doing that, money compounded. So when I quit my full-time job that year after, I tripled my revenue because I had the time to then create things that leveraged.
Yeah.
This is really scary for someone who comes from potentially a fitness background where you are in scarcity a lot. And I loved what you said about, I kind of think about it like a marathon versus a sprint. I think a lot of people, there's a difference between operating in scarcity and operating with intensity, right? So what you're describing is like, I want to operate with intensity. I want to do things that are deliberate. I want to make the right decisions. I want to have strategy behind everything I'm doing. But if I'm operating from a scarcity, a desperation, and anxiety, that emotional hijack is going to make it so much easier to burn out faster. So when I see people give up, it's probably not because it's hard. They're giving up because they're so emotionally drained from the process, because they can't manage their own expectations or they can't manage their own energy around it. So I love that you mentioned that, like, you need to have breaks and you need to build in some of these more strategic downtimes, even if it's just a couple hours. I remember when I started making decisions based on after that moment, like, I remember just being like, I have to take like weekends off, and I felt weird because I could be working, right? There's people who want to train with me.
It's uncomfortable.
It is, especially if you're driven and ambitious. But I love the way you said, if you want to have a long career, I've been doing this 12 years now, which like is long in internet years.
Yeah, 100%.
But like, there's a lot of iterations, or you become a different person with each different level of business. And so, and I recently went through one about 2 years ago as well. You go through these transitions, but you have to become a different person to get to that level.
100%. And I almost think, like, just going back to what we were talking about before, there is a lot of scarcity and a lot of like insecurity in the fitness industry. And I think that could almost drive, like, that insecurity almost drives that scarcity as well, I think. And with that, I might get like a little bit of backlash, or some people may not agree with this. I've said it before, but we get into fitness because there is that insecurity in the first place, right? Like, it's like, if I can just control my perception of how people see me, or the perception of other people who see me, then, you know, everything okay, and I don't have to be my real self. And, you know, we were speaking before about how you were vulnerable and you opened up and you spoke about like the human behind the business and the human behind Jillfit and who you had to become. So it's just so interesting how it's like, it is almost like a journey of like, we have to go through these things to know not what we want, like what we don't want, and then to drive sort of more towards what we do want. And so
I would love that you said that about like body insecurity too, because and maybe you've had this experience. I certainly did. If you don't take care of your own body shit, it's going to just follow you into the business stuff, right? Like, if you don't get right with like, I have value and like your own self-worth and your own like self-talk and all of that stuff within the body space, it will literally just follow you. Now you're not making enough money. Now you don't have enough clients. Now you're not like making enough impact. You don't have enough followers. Like, there's always going to be lack in any area of your life, whether it's your relationships, it just follows you. So you have to do the internal work of knowing that you're good. And I think one of the things that you mentioned way earlier in the podcast that I want to make sure people don't miss is, I'm not a huge fan of like sitting in front of a mirror and being like, you're good enough, you're confident, you're a good person. Like, affirmations are fine. Yeah. But what you said earlier, which is you have to get the reps to know that you're good. One of the things that Shantae says, the Movement Meister, who both of us know, she always says, if you feel like you have imposter syndrome, it might be because you do, and you are not good.
I was literally just about to say the same thing. Like, I was literally just about to say that.
Yeah, she's like, you might have it because you might have it, and it's okay. Yeah. But realize that you don't have to fake it. You don't have to be like, I'm amazing. You can literally just say, hey, I'm not really good at this yet. Let me go get some reps. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, especially, I always say marketing ruins everything, even though I am a marketer. I feel like people are jumping into the online space now and immediately thinking they should be doing 10K months. And I'm like, but no one knows you, and you're not good yet, and you haven't built a brand quite yet. And it's okay. That stuff takes time. So the better you can manage your own expectations about the process, the longer the career and the more lucrative career you have.
Yeah, 100%. I love what you were saying. Yeah, I love that. Like, she said the exact thing I was about to say, is like, there can be truth to imposter syndrome. Like, if you feel like, you know, you're not good enough and you can't compartmentalize, like you were saying, your body image issues are going to follow you into business and are going to follow you into your relationships. It's going to flow across all different parts of your life. So, you know, if you're starting out, like, it is amazing time for you, because, you know, do you want to build you can build a business off scarcity, but do you want to? Like, you're going to get to 100K months, you know, 100K, like whatever, and you're still going to be like, this isn't enough, I'm not good enough. There's still going to be that mind chatter. So doing that from the get-go, like getting the mindset right from the start, is one of the best things that you can do. And I think, like, with so much more information out there these days, like online, we are so lucky to be able to have access to people like yourself, where, you know, you've gone through the hard things. So hopefully, you know, people don't have to go through as hard of a time it was to build that, and can move through it a lot quicker. Because, you know, if you don't have the help and the support to move through it quicker, it can take years. Like, it can take longer.
It can take a long time. And also, you know, there's a lot of talk right now around the space becoming so saturated, and, you know, which is true. There are way more online coaches now than there ever have been. And it was definitely accelerated by the pandemic, but there's also way more potential clients than there's ever been. And so it's not that it's a saturated market, it's a sophisticated market, which means that as a professional, you need to be better. And to me, I love this. I'm just like, let's go. There's opportunity there for someone who really wants to make it work. I used to think, and I think this was the truth in 2010, 2011, 2012, when I was getting started, I used to think anyone could do this. And now I just don't think that's the truth. And by the way, that it's not a better or worse thing. It's not like, oh, some people are good and some people aren't. It's because there is a level of uncertainty that you have to be okay with. And I wonder if you would agree with this. Yes, you have to have the skills. You need to know how to market and message and brand and do all the business skills. But you also have to have the mindset, because it will test you, right? All of your limiting beliefs, all of your all of your insecurities are going to come out as a result of this process. And it's hard because you can't teach it, right? You have to throw yourself into the lion's den and figure it out. That's why I always tell people but recognize, have the self-awareness to go, yes, I'm being emotionally hijacked by this, or I'm catastrophizing 10 steps down the road, and you have to be able to sit with problems, because there's never not gonna be problems. There just isn't. You have different problems. I always tell my students, take enough massive action to earn yourself new problems, better problems.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, you are a solution-based professional. I always say that you can see something as a pain or you can see it as a puzzle, and you really have to figure out, okay, do I have the temperament for this? And not everyone does. And not everyone has to, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know, some people they're like, I really want to look, if you're struggling to follow your passion every second, then maybe it's not really your passion, and that's okay too. Go get a job and have value there and find something else. Not everyone needs to do this. So if you feel like you're constantly every day is a struggle, there's some days that are tough, but if every single day is a struggle in your business, it might not be for you, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and even with that, even on that note, that's still self-awareness. It's still having that self-awareness that maybe this isn't the path that you want to take, but you don't have to. Not everybody has to. If you love, there's this trainer who has been at my local, I go back every so often to my local Fitness First, and he's been there ever since I started, and he's just there every single day training clients all the time, and he's just he loves it. He dipped into the online space for a little bit, and he's like, no, I just love
being patient with people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's completely fine. And he loves his life, and, he has properties, and he's just worked really, really hard, but there was no desire to have that, that extra time freedom or the extra, let's just say, stress of running your own business. But it does definitely take someone who is okay with holding uncertainty and holding risk,
a level of risk, for sure. No, and that's the thing is, like you said, self-awareness really is the big key. And look at yourself. It's not that you won't have moments where you're sort of struggling through stuff. I'm interested in your take on the pandemic. Pandemic completely changed our business at JillFit, because trainers and coaches were scrambling to find out how to do online business. So my business blew up. And I hate to say it because 2020 was such a bad year for so many people, but for fitness business, online fitness business, you couldn't even buy equipment at, anywhere online, because people are working at home, and Peloton and all these online solutions blew up. But also, I wasn't equipped. I didn't have the infrastructure at the time. So I just started taking on one-on-one clients, and I was on Zoom 8 hours a day, most days of the week. And I was like, why? I'm back at the gym. I'm literally back at the gym, except it's my desk. And so that was when early 2020, I vowed to do things differently. I hired a team. I completely scaled the business, because I was like, I can't do it. So it's the self-awareness of knowing, do I want to take the next step? And am I capable of it? And so you're always evaluating that. Everything was fine until then it wasn't. And so noticing what inputs are coming in. If I'm struggling with this, I don't know, I don't like team, or I'm not a good manager, or I don't want to do what it takes to invest. When I started, there was very low overhead. You don't have to spend that much money on anything. It was are you kidding me? 95% profit. And now it's we have more ad costs, we have more software costs. And if you're someone who is operating in scarcity and you see that as spending money versus investing in a business that's going to, you're kidding me? Still, we are at about 60% profit at JillFit, and that's still massive compared to a brick and mortar or the margins on any other kind of business. But you have to be okay with that. A lot more money goes out the door now.
Yeah, 100%. And I love what you said just before about being an entrepreneur. It is pivoting, right? It is being innovative. And 2020, we had to see a lot of innovation. Otherwise, the things didn't go well. And, the pandemic did really well for me as well. Like, coaches and personal trainers were not in the gym. So what did they do with their time? Let's upskill so that when we go back, we can do better when we go back. And so it was, again, like, I don't want to say luck, because it's also like, and I saw an opportunity, I took action, I saw an opportunity in the space of women's health and fitness, which wasn't really a huge thing as well. And it's just, it has gone from there in terms of like, I have invested a lot since then as well, like hiring a team, like, like investing in myself as well, because the person that you need to become is very different from, I was doing one-to-one online coaching. And, you said you went back to like your desk is the gym, like, but what you do is you took action and you course corrected, and it's not going to be perfect. Like you can spend a whole year setting up the back end systems and doing all that, or you can just do it and course correct as you go, because some movement is better than just no movement. And
also you have to throw yourself into the ring, right? Like you don't know what's going to work until you start getting more reps in that area. So if we had waited until we were like, until everything was perfect, ducks all in a row, take action, that could have been wrong too. So you have to practice. So putting ourselves out there. So some of the big pivots we did was we went from like a 2-person executive team to like now we have 8 people on our team full time. And then we started really just like scaling our paid traffic. I also invested in a mentor who this is my 3rd year with him, who like had the business that I wanted. I mean, I talked to him, he's like, I work 1 hour a day. And I was like, that's what I want. But he has a machine, and you and I were talking about this before we turned on the mic. He has a machine that runs. It's not him at the helm every second. And for a long time, I loved the idea of solopreneurship. I was like, cool, it's a lean business. I can go to Australia for 3 weeks. No one bothers me, right? I don't have meetings on my schedule. But I was missing a key part, that if you hire a team that's enrolled in your vision and is actually competent and has their zone of genius, it allows for you to have more time freedom, to have more and make a bigger impact. And so not only we increased our revenue 70% in 2021 and are on task to do it again this year, but but it requires a different skill set. I had to become a better manager. I had to become a better leader, and that shit was messy sometimes, So you have to trust, just like we were talking about earlier, that trust translates. I don't know about you. Did you ever play sports as a kid?
Growing up, every sport.
Yeah, I think the maestro and I always talk about that. I think people who played sports have a resiliency that maybe some other people don't, because and they have a self-trust too. They're like, because you can work your ass off and still get your ass beat in a game, but you have a resiliency, you have a level of self-trust and confidence that instilled in you from high-level sports, and it translates in. So while I've never done this one thing over here, I've never hired a team, I've never done this thing, I'm like, I can figure it out, right? Like, it's not gonna be pretty, but I'm okay with imperfection in the name of getting it better. And so I think if you can't have a really fragile approach, right? You have to be like, I got this, and even if I don't, I trust myself to figure it out.
100%. Let's talk about, I'd love to hear like your take on becoming a manager and becoming like a leader of working with the team and working with people, because you actually do need a part of that for being a personal trainer and a coach, because you're working with people. Like we were speaking about this as well before off air. It was like, you can have the best program, you can be the best coach, you can, know everything about training and nutrition and all that. But if you don't know people and you don't know how to work with people and to connect with people and build relationships and things like that, especially online, because it's a lot harder to build relationships online, is like, that is such a huge component. We're working with like different people, different nervous systems, different personalities, all this types of thing. So how has that journey been for you? And how did you, like, what did you do? Did you step into that? Like, was that natural for you, or did you read? Did your mentor help you? How did you become like this leader of this team and managing all these different people?
Yeah, I always had my mentor is James Wedmore, and he said when we first started working together, first of all, he'd been doing this longer than I have. He's worked with thousands of businesses. He had the business model I wanted. So all the things that need to be in place, like for when you're looking at a mentor. And he said that the hardest thing he ever did was build his team. And I really resonated with that. I was lucky that I had a full-time VA. So she was already full-time with me. She like literally does everything in the business, the complete opposite of me in terms of she's very detail-oriented, meticulous.
It's just the same as my VA. She's a unicorn, right?
Exactly.
It's the best thing ever.
Right. She loves to-do lists and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I am so like not a detail-oriented person. And so, like, luckily, she's been with me since 2014. It was just the two of us. And I don't know if you've read the book Rocket Fuel or Traction by Gino Wickman. He has 2 books. Anyway, that's the model that we use at JillFit. And essentially, that there's sort of 2 people at the head of the business. There's the visionary and the integrator. And if you're a solopreneur, chances are you're doing both of those things, right? When you're getting started, right? You're being the coach, the content creator, the growth person. You're also being the admin, and you're taking care of the, just the legal stuff and I don't know, all that kind of stuff. And so my first hire after 2021 was an integrator. And if you go on like Indeed.com or Upwork or looking for someone, you're probably not going to find that word in there, but it'd probably be the closest thing to like a project manager or an head of operations, something like that.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind that is that when you have someone sort of coming behind you who can enroll your vision. So I say, hey, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing this year. This is where we're headed. These are our goals. Here's our 5-year vision, whatever. And then they come and they make it happen. So they do everything in the business from like the sales page, the landing pages, all the email sequences. Like it's at the point now where like sometimes I don't even know how to work our own software, like stuff like that,
No idea.
Right. And so, but it's different. And this is where James really helped me because I'd worked with a lot of contractors before, designers and VA, AAV people, stuff like that. It's not, if you're building a team, it's not the same as having a bunch of to-do lists. And being like, you do this, you do this, you do this, and giving people to-do lists because that still requires you. Yeah. If you're building a team of people who are enrolled in the vision of where we're going, they take a lot more initiative, right? Yeah. So like there's things that I don't even think of that my team comes to me and they're like, hey, we already thought of this or we already implemented this. And so that's a totally different feel than you just being up here giving people task lists. Because I think a lot of us fall into that where we're just like, because we still have that control, right? We still like want to hang on to that control.
Yeah.
But in 2020, when the business blew up, I was like, anyone could take anything. Any sort of control, like nature just went out the window. It's like, anyone want to take any of this stuff. And so I got over my controlling tendencies really quickly. Now, I think we have this as solopreneurs, especially if we're driven or business owners, especially if you have an elite level fit. It's like you're driven, you're ambitious. You sometimes worry that people can't do it as well as you, or you're like, well, they're not going to care as much about the business. And I think that that's a mistake. I think there's a lot of people who actually can do what you need even better than you can, but you need to trust that they're out there. Yeah. And you also have to be okay with giving them some wiggle room to mess up. Now, we've definitely had things where like links are broken in emails and things go at the wrong time or whatever. But the key for us in growing the successful business, and I would say we're like 80% there. We're not 100% there. This is 2 years in, is honest and open communication. Like
100%.
That's it. Like we have honest conversations. I've had hard conversations with everyone on my team, but they feel safe bringing things to me, right? So like if something does get messed up or whatever, we have a conversation about it and they feel safe knowing they're not going to get fired right that second, right? And also, you have to remember your business isn't that fragile, right? A wrong link goes out. It's not like the end of the world, right? Oh, we have a refund request. Oh my God, the business is about to explode. It's like this stuff happens. And so when you have the perspective of like the business isn't that fragile, nothing small like this can bring it down, you're much more able to give people on your team the freedom to really grow within the business, right? And so one thing for me, especially as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure this is the same for you, I want my team members to feel like they have a say in how we do. So we do a compensation model where everyone's on a salary, but then there's also like bonus structures in place, right? So based on how launches do or based on there's an opportunity. So I don't actually give promotions in the business. I tell people they have to take them. So I'm like, if you want more money, then you have to learn a new skill. You have, like, our programs are business programs. So if you want to go and learn copywriting, awesome. We have a course for that. Go in, learn copywriting, and then take a stab at the sales page and bring it to me. And then you can now you can take on the copywriting as well, give yourself promotion. So I don't like just give them extra money for extra money's sake. Are you helping to make the entire pie bigger so that your slice is bigger? And so a lot of this stuff is soft skills, right? But like, I think a lot of it came naturally because if you have an online personal brand or you've been a trainer, like you're a natural leader, whether or not you want to be, but it's really just the communication piece and the incentivizing and making sure that they feel fulfilled in their roles as well. So that we we all can work to make the pie bigger.
Yeah, because we were speaking about before, like not everyone is going to be that visionary. Not everyone is going to have like the big vision. And, you know, it may surprise some people to hear like both of us were like, we're not like detailed people. Like I don't
Nope.
like having a set schedule. Like
Nope.
I want to be able to like move things around and have that flexibility. Like that's why we got into this in the first place.
Totally.
And I think, you know, one thing as well is that I see is people freak out like at the like when you first have that space, like when you first take that time off, there is that like guilt or whatever it is when you first step away, and it's like being comfortable with that, because when you do take that step back and you're not so like in, it allows creativity to flow, it allows ideas to flow. This is when you can innovate because you actually have that space. And you know, it's so important. I love what you're saying about your team is like you're actually giving them the responsibility for their own upskilling. It's not like they're not at the helm of like, if I do all this, then, you know, I'm going to get a certain place. It's like, well, actually, what do you want to do? Like giving them the option of like,
Yep.
you know, how much do you want to make? Like, how much do you want to upskill? I freaking love like,
yeah,
like,
and
it's
you
such
know,
a great model.
and it's subtle stuff too, right? You know, I think they have to have the room to mess up. They have to, whenever they do bring something to me that feels vulnerable for them to bring to me, I don't immediately shoot it down, right? I mean, of course, I'm always going to make like the end decision will always be my decision, but I'm never going to shoot it down if they have ideas, right? Like, so there has to be, it's like soft skills. It's going back to just being a normal human being and just not having a complex about like, it's my way, the highway. It's like, listen to your team. It may or may not be. And it's interesting because we did our first team retreat this year, and it was so great because everyone on the team was like, this is the first time that I feel like I've had like a seat at the table in a company. It's usually like I never have a seat at the table, and everyone felt like their ideas were heard. And that's gonna, to me, especially because I need my work to mean something, I know that they need their work to
have
mean
a
something.
purpose,
Otherwise,
yeah.
why would they stay, right? They've actually shown in research that people care more about the feeling of purpose in their job than they
Yeah.
do about the fucking money.
100%.
So at the end of the day, like that's important to me too, is do they have creative outlets within their job? Yeah, of course, there's things that just need to get done. We all have stuff like that, but do they feel like there's ways that they're growing personally, professionally within the job itself too? And I don't know how you teach that. You just like, you need to have conversations, you need to be open, you need to check your own emotional space. I'm very, what's the word? Like aware of how my energy affects the team. Always. So if we have a launch that's like kind of going sideways, or a launch we're like not hitting our numbers, I'm not freaking out. I'm not bringing it to the team. I'm not messaging them being like, what's happening? Like, because that's the energy they're going to take on. Right. And I don't want that. That makes it terrible for all of us. We're going to execute what we planned, and then we'll debrief after. Cool. Why did that happen? What do you think? You know, where do we think we went wrong? Where can we do better next time? It does no one any favors for me to completely freak out. And that's part of being a leader's level-headedness and checking yourself emotionally. And that's not always easy. So, but you wouldn't know unless you start doing that and start recognizing yourself, because the emotion doesn't make it better. Emotion's not a solution. And so it's a lot of, just like you said, mindset work. It's a lot of self-awareness work. It's a lot of introspection.
Well, we were talking about before how, you know, these pieces of your life leak into one another. You can't compartmentalize. So like that we were talking about, that anxiousness, like anxious attachment. Like you can have an anxious attachment to another person in your relationship, or like, you know, looking at even like your caregivers, your parents, like going back to that is like, if you have that anxious attachment, that's going to play out in your business as well. And so what happens when you do get anxious, it's like that needy, desperate kind of energy, and people feel that. Like, you know, you need to be solid in yourself as a leader and to lead your business, and especially to lead a team. They're going to feel that, like you said before. And it's like, how can we just be more regulated human beings, like in all parts of our life, right? Like, you know, being a coach and a personal trainer, like, you know, the seasons of business. Can you hold yourself in the ebbs and the flows of business? Because it does ebb and flow. But if you're freaking out when you're, you know, it's a low month or whatever, like you're not going to be able to hold the high month, because you're going to go the high month and you're going to be like, how can I do that again? Like, how can I do that again? And that's like just staying regulated through the ups and the downs is one of the most important things you can do as
It
a
is,
human.
and James says that the business will only grow to the level of problems you can handle, right? So if you're a beginner and you're just getting online and you're brand new to this and you're every day is an emotional hijack, how are you going to ever handle advanced problems if you can't handle beginner problems, right? And so it comes down to the stuff we're talking about. The solution isn't another strategy, another tool, another funnel, another coach, right? The solution is you and figuring out, okay, all the stuff we're talking about this podcast, expectation management, managing, your own energy because you want to see this as a marathon on a sprint, realizing it's going to take time, realizing it's going to take reps, right? All of this sort of expectation management stuff. So I teach this in terms of what I call failure expectation. There's two types of people, either those who are like, expect it to be smooth sailing, everything's going to be easy, it's going to be A plus B equals C, completely linear. And when they run up on an obstacle, inevitably, right, they crumble. Yeah. And then the second type of person goes, I know this is going to be hard. I know things are going to go sideways. I know at some point I'm going to run up on an obstacle, so that when it does show up, they're like, oh, here it is. How do I get around this? And they're ready to pivot. Yeah. And so you have to ask yourself, what kind of person am I? And if you're highly emotional and get emotionally hijacked very easily, then this might not be, or you have to do a lot of self-work to get to the point. Yeah.
And taking that personal responsibility for that as well. Because oftentimes it's like...
It's easy to blame and complain, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's easy to blame like things outside of you as well, but looking at yourself is like... Because you, like, that's really the only thing that you can control. Like, you can't control, like... like no one knew the pandemic was coming. You can't control like the global landscape. You can't control, people and what they're doing and whether they're buying or whatever, but you can stay you through all of it, and how you manage that is ultimately going to determine, like, number one, like your staying power in your business. Like, you're not going to give up on a launch just because people didn't buy straight away. There's that sense of entitlement again. It's like, I'm just going to put this out and like people should just know to buy it and how great it is. It's like,
you have like no skills, like no business skills yet.
Yeah, and like you were saying before, making people feel safe, making them feel seen, heard, like, really getting into, and I've said this before, is like really getting into like the psychology of your client, who your client is, what their fears are, what their desires are. And oftentimes, like when as personal trainers, sometimes it is us. And so it's also looking at like, you might have transcended something. You might have transcended your insecurities. You might have transcended the all or nothing approach, whatever it kind of is. Well, make sure you've transcended that all or nothing approach when you're getting into business, if that's what you were like, yes, in the start of your fitness journey, because we know where that leads, because ultimately that's going to determine like the outcome is like, how are you being through your launches? How are you being in your business day to day when things are going well, when things are not going so well, when a client is defaulting or a client's not getting results? Like,
yep. It's so true, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I've had several moments like that in my career. One was like about a year and a half in. We were doing online one-on-one training, and I had 5 coaches. All of their rosters were maxed out, so that's when we started scaling the business and leveraging. But I remember we had this one client, and she texted one of our coaches like 73 times on a Sunday.
Oh, dear.
It was like a Sunday, 73. And so, at first, I'm like, I'm a new business owner. So the first thing I think of is like, is this chick crazy? Like, what is she doing? Like, and so I started blaming the client. And I started blaming her. And I'm like, does she just not know this isn't okay? And like, I started kind of talking shit. And then I was like, oh, this is our fault. This is my fault. I've enabled this. Mm-hmm. I didn't set expectations. Mm-hmm. I don't have any boundaries. Mm-hmm. And I made her so dependent on the coach that she can't literally live without talking to someone. So that was a moment where I was like, oh, this is on me. It's so easy as a business owner to blame your clients. Oh, this client's crazy. Oh, this client doesn't, respect my boundaries. Yeah. Oh, this client just wants their money back. This is a high maintenance client. Sure. Like, you don't have to work with every single client if you don't want to. But you have to look at, if you're constantly complaining about your clients, it might be you and how you're interacting with them. Same exact thing with team, right? So if you're constantly complaining about your team member, this person didn't do this, they sent out the wrong link. Who's the common denominator, right? And so if you can take absolute 100% radical responsibility for everything happening in your business at all times, there's gonna be moments where you're like, you're gonna want to blame that person. Yeah, they sent out the wrong link. I had a moment like this a couple of years ago when like we sent like a bunch of people to a sales page. It was like card open, right? And we sent email, card open, and the button was wrong. It was like a completely wrong price point. And that's like people are waiting. It was like a wait list launch. It was like an early action bonus. And I had this moment where I was like, fuck. Like, because how many people hit the page, saw the price point, and then bounced, so you don't know that. You can't quantify it. And yet I'm not the one in charge of sales pages anymore. But when I was a solopreneur, I was, right? And I tested those buttons and whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we got it fixed within like a few minutes, but it was one of those things where it was been so easy to just be like, why did you test the button?
Yeah.
But I was like, but that's on me because we didn't have a conversation.
Yes.
So he should have just known, no, I should have been like, hey. And so it just was a good learning moment for the two of us to be like, hey, you know what? I take responsibility. I know that, yes, like we haven't had this conversation, but now we've had this conversation. We'll test all buttons from here on out, right? Like, but you don't know until something goes wrong sometimes. So you have to, as easy as it could be like, oh, like you messed up the launch or whatever you want to say, it's my business, right? So at the end of the day, I have to take responsibility for that. And I'm not going to fire him because he missed one little thing, right? It's like, okay, this alerts us as a team that it's something you have to work on here. This is a system or an automation that you haven't taken care of.
Yeah, that's huge. That's so big. Like, I think that's so important and so great, and I really appreciate like all your insight on this. Is there anything else like you think is like we might have skipped over or missed in terms of like who you need to become and the things that you need to address if you want to, build your business and have this successful online business from, whether it is like starting in the gym and just getting into online coaching or scaling your online coaching business? Is there anything else you want to leave the listeners with?
I mean, you kind of said it earlier, but I will say this, and I know obviously that you mentor people in this too. Like, you need to get mentorship. That's one of the non-negotiable things. And it's funny because to me, it's like a cheat code. Like, everyone who's successful has a coach.
Yeah.
And yet the people who are the least likely to hire coaches are beginners, and the people who need it the most.
It's so funny.
Right? And so, and it's fine, but realize that it's a cheat code for a reason. There's a reason why you talk to someone like yourself and you're like, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on mentorship in the last few years. That's not coincidence. And so I will say that. I know you mentioned that earlier, but I will say, even at where we're at, we still always have coaches. We still always have mentors. We're still always working on something specific in the business. So who has that thing that I need to know right now? And how much do I have to pay them to get access to that playbook? Yeah. And so I would just say, like, for those of you guys listening and, following Kayla, like, make sure that you guys are, obviously you're in her programs and things like that, but make sure that you know that that's sort of a non-negotiable next step.
100%. And look at it in a way that, if you value mentorship, your clients are going to value that mentorship as well, right? Like, what are you there for? You're there to help your clients get results quickly. Everybody knows that they need to train and eat well, like if they want to get the body of their dreams. But why don't they do it? It's because they don't have, like, is there something underlying that you need to help them with and that you can give them mentoring on as well? Totally. Like, because you can, like, everyone knows how to give a training plan and an eating plan or whatever it is, but it's like, how do people actually get the results? And it's the people that have a coach, right? Like, that's why you're here. That's why you're here for your clients, is because that having a coach is going to get them their results quicker and better and more efficiently, and not doing like all these crazy things and avoiding the mistakes that the person who is like that you've made, right? Yeah. And us as well, like avoiding the mistakes that we've made, we can help you, and our mentors as well, helping us avoid those mistakes. So it's almost like, that compounding of like, being able to collapse time and reach that quicker. Because you can do it yourself, but like,
how many hours,
how many times
years will you waste like trying to piece it together yourself? And I also add like an additional sort of caveat to this, especially in the States. Like, we're in a recession right now, and there's a lot of talk around like we have massive inflation and scarcity around money. If you are operating in scarcity and you're worried that like your clients aren't going to have the money to pay you, show them it's safe by you paying someone, right? Like, that's the thing, is like, if you want people to invest in you and you want them to feel safe investing in you as a coach, show them that you're still investing and that you're not like to bringing it all in and being in this like place of scarcity, because that just reinforces them it's not safe to invest. So I mean, definitely if you are investing, you should be talking about your investments, especially because your clients maybe never invested before. So not only are you selling your plan or you're selling your program, but you're now selling the concept of investing. And so you need to be walking your walk big time.
100%. It totally, like, it gives you that, like, that authority as well. It's like, you know, I'm going, like, leaders go first. Like, leaders go first even when there isn't evidence that something's going to work, right? If you don't have evidence, you know, first of all, say you're getting into the online space of people paying you, you go first. There's your evidence. Like, you've invested in yourself. You're paying, like, whatever that you like, to invest in something that you value. So there's your evidence. People pay because you paid. Like, you are your own evidence. So I think that's super important. And I love that you brought that up, especially, like, so timely right now, you know, talking about the recession and also talking about, you know, Christmas time and people dropping off over Christmas time. Like I said to one of my other coaches as well, is that, you know, this is the time when you need a coach the most. Like, the hard times is when you need a coach. Like, don't just, you don't just invest when times are good, right? Like, invest when times are tough, because that's when you actually need the support the most. Because, you know, your mind goes to crazy places and you just have that safe anchor, that person that is that safe anchor for you, to just bring you and be like, it's okay. Like, everything passes. It's all going to pass. So I really love that conversation. Thank you, Jill. You can find Jill at JillFit on Instagram. Is there any other places that people can find you?
It's just jillfit.com and jillfit on all the socials. So if you guys are interested in connecting, would love to hear from you, where you're at and what you're up to. And that's pretty much it. But thank you so much for having me. I think we could definitely talk all day.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll have to do a part 2.
Yeah, for sure.